Port Harcourt, I'm Dio. Merry Christmas once again. 9 minutes gone past 5 p.m. Discussions continue. The Electoral Act Amendment Bill is arguably the most talked about matter in the country at the moment. Well, here's the latest from that situation. This one cut to the Punch newspaper. Electoral Act Amendment, Buhari returns bill to National Assembly, faults direct primaries, cites insecurity. Now, the President, Muhammadu Buhari, has asked the National Assembly to remove the clause that has to do with direct primaries from the Electoral Act Amendments Bill. It was gathered on Monday, Parliament, that the President, who stated this in his letter to the Senate, asked the National Assembly to remove the controversial clause on direct primaries from the bill and return the proposed law to him for assent. Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Garaba Shehu, confirmed to a correspondent that Buhari had sent the letter to the National Assembly. But a source who was privy to the content of the letter, which is now public by the way, said the president refused because political parties had their various constitutions that stipulated the mode of primaries that should be adopted. According to the source, the president argued it would be unconstitutional to force parties to adopt direct primaries. Pardon me. Now, this is what we're discussing at the moment. Has the president taken the right step or the right decision in this matter, and what might be the implication of his refusal or implications of his refusal to give assent to the bill as passed by the National Assembly? My guest has joined me for this conversation, Barrister Festus Oguche. Barrister Oguche, good evening to you. Welcome to Hard Facts and Merry Christmas to you.
Yes, good evening, Dio. Thanks for inviting me. Compliments of the season.
Now, this has been a much talked about matter indeed.
Yes, it is.
For some time right now. Ever since the matter of an amendment to the bill first came up, of course, this is aftermath of a lot of a long running process. There was also have been amendments before the last 2019 general elections.
Yes.
The president did not go with the amendments at that time, citing the closeness or the proximity to the actual general elections and concerns that it might have some impact on the process, which might raise questions as to the credibility of the process itself. At least this was the president's argument at that time. And ever since, there has been the belief and expectations from not a few Nigerians that prior to the next general elections 2023, there will be amendments to the Electoral Act, especially as regards working on processes to make it more transparent, including electronic transmission of results and whatever else experts and professionals and well-meaning individuals feel is required to make the process free and as fair and as credible as possible. Now, the issue of electronic transmission was the debate at one time. The National Assembly appeared to not want that included, but after the hue and cry of Nigerians and media pressure, it seems, the National Assembly bowed and then included that into the amendment, even though INEC had insisted prior to that time it had capacity to go ahead with electronic transmission. The National Assembly, or at least some elements within there, appeared to want to truncate that process, insisting that there wasn't enough coverage, but that matter appeared to have been laid to rest. Now, it seemed that the coast was clear for us to have the amendment signed into law by Mr. President, and then from nowhere, it seems, a clause was snuck into this bill mandating or directing the parties must conduct direct primaries in choosing their candidates who are going to contest for elections. Then sent to Mr. President for assent. The President has rejected the bill, citing that particular clause, insisting it must be expunged, then sent back to him for assent. Is the point where we are right now? I believe my summary captures the situation at the moment.
Very succinctly, yes.
Was it always coming? Were we always going to arrive at this point? Or was this, as some of the things that have transpired so far, was this unexpected?
Well, I think the latest on the matter is that the Speaker of the House of Representatives had said they had a very private section today, and they said that every discussion on the amendments is shelved to next year, 2022. I just saw that now, and I think you've asked a very apt question in the sense that it's been a long-running process for electoral amendments, the much sought after electoral amendment, and there's been some lukewarmness or half-hearted approach to these amendments by the political elites, apparently because they have fear of the unknown. They have also fear of their security of their positions and what have you. These clear-footedness did not start today. It started during the PDP days when, after our very dear president Yaradua looked at the process that brought him out and said, no, this cannot be, instituted the Justice Mohammed Iwai's electoral panel commission to look at the pros and cons of our electoral process and look for ways to make recommendations towards a more credible process. And the committee did tremendous work. They told almost all the local governments of the Federation. I submitted 2 memoranda and a lot of other persons, and they came up with what I consider to be the roadmap to the conduct of credible elections in Nigeria. But then the members of the Senate then and the House of Representatives, who are beneficiaries of the sham conducted by Professor Morris, who took one look at the document and threw it overboard. And here we are now. The president, before he became president, was in the forefront for the pursuit and implementation of that particular recommendation of Mohammed Uwais. He was actually there in the forefront, making the case for it. Apparently, he got into power and felt maybe it's not necessary after all. Until date, we still have very vast areas that need amendments. We're able to scale through the issue of electronic transmission of results, which is a very vital area, in spite of, again, the clear-footedness of the National Assembly and all that for obvious reasons. But this time around, I think the president is correct. Very correct. Because the issue of direct primaries and indirect primaries, or the mode of primaries to be conducted in the electoral process, is not one for legislation. It's simply that we have an INEC that is still not strong, an institution to make these laws, because Section 160 of the Constitution has given it that power to do all things necessary, requisite to the conduct of free, fair, credible elections. Now, the exclusive legislative list of the Constitution empowers the National Assembly to make laws for the regulation of political parties. But it's not an all-round license to make regulation or make laws for issues pertaining to the internal mechanism of political parties. Because these parties are recognized by the Constitution, it is on the platform of these parties that you can ascribe or subscribe or aspire to any political position, elective, of course. And they have their own constitutions. So it would be totally out of place for the National Assembly to make legislation in that direction. Though the ideal thing is to have a uniform process of primary elections, because it is going to be one particular conduct of elections. You will not expect Party A to come through the indirect mode and Party B to come through the direct mode. But then this requires a lot of consultations with the political parties. So if it is included in the amendments, then of course the president has to take a second look at it, because I know that a lot of people are bracing up for judicial challenge at the end to challenge whatever process comes out, if it is indirect or direct. Some persons want it direct because it panders to their own interest. Others want it indirect because it panders to their own interest. But I think it is just to get a consensus of stakeholders, particularly the political parties, to agree on a particular process.
That takes me to my next question. One really confounding thing about this development right now is, and I don't know if there is, but I'm yet to come across any political party's official statement being, or official position being in agreement with what the National Assembly is trying to do.
The PDP had made a statement to that effect at the time the matter was being deliberated at the National Assembly. I recall that
it agrees with direct primaries.
Yes, that it has to be indirect. It's very obvious.
That it has to be indirect. That's what I'm saying. That I'm yet to see the official position of any party agreeing with the National Assembly's position that it must be direct. I don't think any political party has put up such an official position publicly that it must be. So that said, which is the confounding part here, every member of the National Assembly, Senate and House of Reps, emanated from party. They are members of political parties. So how is it that they were able to arrive at this decision within the National Assembly, which their political parties now, whether it's the PDP or APC or any other party for that matter, to the best of my knowledge, are all saying we don't agree with this, it cannot work? How did the National Assembly members then how were they able to pass that in the first place?
Without the collaboration of their political parties,
Precisely.
of course. That's a very obvious answer. That's the manner of representation we have in the National Assembly. There's not much recourse to party supremacy. It's not just party supremacy, necessarily. It's also the popular supremacy of the people, the sovereignty of the people. How many legislations have they done that panders or are in consonance with the will of the people? Of course, they tell you that there's nothing like referendum in the Constitution, as if you go to England and begin to look for referendum. It's not there. But it's part of the democratic process. So it will not be surprising if the legislators are taking a position that is totally counter to their political parties. It's just the way our political system, our democratic system has been formed, and maybe our democratic license needs to be upped in that direction to ensure that there's conformity to a large extent. But it's not just the political parties agreeing. It is the system itself, because I can bet you that some of these issues that we could have entail the amendments of laws, particularly the electoral laws, are not issues that are matters of legislation, like party primaries, like electoral crimes, electronic transmission of results. It's simply that our political system has not been properly matured enough to imbibe these things in such manner that INEC, the electoral body, can sit on its own and take these decisions, because it has been so empowered by the Constitution. I mentioned Section 160 of the Constitution. It's also because we have the political elite that's made up of people that are more of sparrows, that people want the real political process to emerge. And they're all doing it for self-serving reasons. Those in the National Assembly, the governors, begin to ask yourself what their take on it, whether it's direct or indirect, but they know what they want to achieve through it. But then all hands must be on deck to ensure that whatever process emerges at the end of the day will be the one that represents the will of the people, where they can express themselves positively, one way or the other, in the direction of democracy. It's very important.
It is Hot Factor 90.3 Nigeria Info and here in Port Harcourt. We got it's 21 minutes gone past 5 o'clock right now. We've got headlines at 5:30 p.m. But for the moment, the President Buhari has returned the bill to the National Assembly, amending the Electoral Act, citing or faulting direct primaries as prescribed in the amended version by the National Assembly. My guest, Mr. Festus Oguche, will go for commercial break now. Headlines 5:30 p.m. We'll return afterwards. The conversation will continue. Do join in via the usual platforms. Back in a bit.
Headline News, Nigeria Info on
92.3.
Headline News.
Good evening, I am Constance Mega. Here are the headlines. Rivers State Chief Judge Justice Simeon Amadi frees 27 inmates from Port Harcourt Correctional Service. Governor Wike signs 2022 budget into law. Senate holds closed-door session to discuss Electoral Amendment Bill rejected by President Buhari. Court imposes 2 million naira fine on Nigeria Immigration Service. On the foreign scene, US buys 500 million free COVID tests. In business, former governor of Anambra State Peter Obi calls for creation of more jobs to boost economic growth. In entertainment, music promoter Kogba Gidi angry with singer Portable, who called out dancer Bokoli for receiving credits for their hit track Zazuze. And in sports, Manchester United defender Aaron Wan-Bissaka, banned from driving for 6 months, fined more than £30,000 for driving while disqualified and without insurance. Well, those are the headlines. The major news comes your way at 6 p.m. Do stay tuned.
We connect you to the world. We connect you to the vicinity. We are Nigeria Info.
Listen to me. I said this is a real situation and the government has to do something about it.
What are you trying to insinuate? All these people looting Nigeria's money? You think?
This is Nigeria Info in the heart of Nigeria.
92.3.
We are Nigeria Info.
And now, hard facts.
Hard Facts
with Dion.
You're welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned. Still hard facts to Nigeria Info and here in Port Harcourt. I'm Dion. 28 minutes ago before 6 p.m. We've got major news at 6. But for the moment, my conversation with Barrister Festus Oguche continues on Electoral Act Amendment. Buhari returns bill to National Assembly. False direct primaries, Cites Insecurity. Barrister Oguche, you're welcome once again.
Thank you very much, Dio.
No doubt there are 1,000,001 questions regarding this matter. But one fundamental one, I suppose, would be the question of how many, what appears to be a trend right now regarding amendments, legislation regarding the electoral process. Because if we have to legislate on simply electronically transmitting results, as we had to legislate on card readers at one time as well, I mean, there's never going to be an end to technology or innovations. So that means if tomorrow or by 2027 or thereabouts, spaceships somewhere or another are required or become technology that could be required to ensure a smooth and transparent electoral process, we would have to go back to the National Assembly to ask for amendments to include spaceships, that INEC can employ spaceships in conducting elections. What do you make of this?
You see, when it comes to electronic voting, the culture started in Mexico, and it started with small units and test drives within small units until it expanded to a larger framework of the entire state of Mexico. So it is with every other innovation that came in. But it does not require any amendment of the existing Electoral Act of any of these advanced democracies to put these things into use, for the conduct of elections. I think that approach was accentuated by the judicial interpretation given to card reader, particularly by the Supreme Court, and by also during the post-election adjudication in the presidential election of 2019, when Atiku brought in some data showing the movement of the results and all that, and it was outrightly rejected as not being part of the electoral process. Like I said earlier, some of these innovations that are coming are not matters of legislation per se. If we have an INEC that is strengthened to the purpose for which it is created, it is something that it can do within the ambit of its own authority, subject to Section 160 of the Constitution, allowing it to do all things possible and necessary requisites to the conduct of free, fair, credible, and transparent polls. But then we are stuck here now with the issue of not just the electronic transmission of results, which have been taken care of, but now whether parties should be, party primaries should be direct or indirect. This is something that if we had an Political Parties Registration and Regulation Commission, which was one of the core recommendations of Justice Mohammed Ways, if you had that kind of body in place, it can take care of some of these things. Sometimes it does not behove on political parties or individuals or stakeholders to determine the course of political movement, particularly in terms of democratic process, particularly in terms of elections. But here we are, governors are zatting themselves, some singly, others collectively, trying to make case of what they want, what they think will suit themselves, not necessarily what will suit Nigerians. And that's a very sorry pass for us, because we have to look for ways to entrench credible elections in our polity, to save democracy, to save Nigeria, and to keep this culture going for quite some time with some shade of confidence that will emanate from the people, where the sovereignty lies. It's very important.
So the president has returned the amended bill to the National Assembly, asking that they must scrap the clause on direct primaries. What's the implication of this for this amendment, seeing the light of day? And there's been plenty of talk about the powers of the National Assembly as well to veto, Mr. President. How exactly does that work, and what do you see playing out eventually?
No, what the president did, like I told you earlier, in the case of the mode of primaries to be conducted, is very correct. I must give that to him, because at the end of the day, if he assents to that bill, you expect a floodgate of litigations from different quarters, and it makes the whole thing look childish. To the extent that I understand, the amendments procedure has been piecemeal. There are a series of amendments before now regarding maybe Electoral Offences Act, regarding also the tenure of a vice president who succeeds a president who is late, regarding a whole lot of things. But then I will state that the proper mode, the proper approach is to leave out that area talking about direct and indirect elections for a more open and transparent procedure involving the stakeholders, political parties, consultations, which can be done next year. That portion relating to electronic transmission of results can be approved for now. If the president gives assent to that one, which I guess was one of the postulations made by Governor Wike, okay, that one we can ride with that one for now and be assured, Nigerians will be assured at least that the elections will be transmitted transparently and it will be legal before the judicial tribunals and the courts. Then leave out the other portion of direct and indirect primaries and maybe leave that for a more detailed and more profound process and procedure to get to an acceptable end. I think that will work very, very well to this. But to leave it out whole in a very wholesome manner will be very disturbing, because Nigerians attach so much premium and value to this electoral amendment. You know, from the level of comments on this area will indicate that Nigerians are very passionate about elections, about the conduct of elections, to ensure that 2023 does not just pass through our fingers like that, but at the end of the Nigerians will raise their shoulders, raise their heads, and tell the world that, look, we elected that leader, we have confidence in him, we have trust in him.
And how about talk about the veto power of the National Assembly?
Well, they can exercise it. Section 58 of the Constitution gives them that power, yes. If the president refuses to assent to a bill and they think that it's a bill, it's an enactment that should see the light of day, they can give it the force of law by passing it into law, and it becomes law automatically. That's how the democratic system works. It is a misnomer to conceive that the legislature will even make law and give it to the president for assent if you put it against the backdrop of the theory of separation of powers. But then we have that theory that allows for the infusion of powers and allows for some of these things to make for a wholesome democratic practice that's acceptable.
What will be the requirement for the National Assembly to be able to veto the president and then pass it into law? And do you think they will be able to meet up with that criteria?
Well, there has been some skepticism about the capacity of the current electoral National Assembly to do that, because I think for quite some time they've been. I would not want to use a word that is being bandied everywhere about their character, but I think they've been so much on the side of the executive, so much so that people begin to wonder if it's a separate entity on its own that can act. But they have the capacity, legislatively speaking, by virtue of the Constitution, by virtue of Section 4 of the Constitution. But the extent to which they could exercise it in this circumstance, where the president is opposed to a particular bill which they've thrown to him for the umpteenth time, is something that I strongly doubt. But if it is the capacity and power to veto the president, they sure have it, and they can exercise that power exclusively to themselves without recourse to the presidents.
If, as you say, the National Assembly, as you pointed out, something you came across just a short while ago, the National Assembly is leaving this matter till next year.
Yes.
Understandably, I suppose they have to go for their Christmas breaks.
Exactly.
Dubai and other places are calling. Do you see us effecting an amendment, one everyone agrees on, especially that which the president wants, excluding direct primaries? Do you see that, see the light of day by next year before general elections?
I very much would like to be very optimistic that the National Assembly and the presidency will not act contrary to the will of the people. I also see that the president, for once, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not his fan. For once, he has done something that endears him to my heart, because it's very straightforward. Even at the point of deliberation, we had the premonition that this will go this way, that you can't make legislation regarding the internal working mechanism of political parties, that you have the power under the exclusive legislative list to regulate political parties, does not give you the power to regulate the internal working mechanism of that political party, particularly in their mode of selecting their candidates. It is totally, completely undemocratic and unconstitutional. So they should have seen this coming. But I see at the end of the day that we're going to reach a consensus. A consensus will be reached in tandem with the will of the people. And that also brings the question of a referendum. Which they say is not part of the Constitution. But does it have to be part of the Constitution before it is invoked? It doesn't have to. Democracy is the will of the people. It emanates from the exercise of the will. And for anything that is thorny, which the National Assembly and the executive, the presidency cannot take care of, you have recourse to the people, which is also possible. They could bring up issues like the cost and all that. But I think at the end of the day, the expectation of Nigerians should be met.
We'll have to wrap it up on that note. Barrister Festus, Oguche, many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Of course, commercial break right now. Top of the hour. At 6, we got the